My name is Curtis Kennard. I am the Correction Ed Lead for the Office of Special Education Programs, Division of Monitoring and State Improvement Planning. Welcome to the Student with Disabilities Correction Facility, COVID-19, and Reopening presentation. Next slide. On this slide, we have the recording disclaimer. Take a minute or two to look at it, please. Next slide. We have the second disclaimer from the 2021 OCTAE Leadership Project Director Conference. Just take a few seconds to look at it, please. Next slide. On this slide, we had the moderator. Before I go into the moderator and the speakers, I would like to say, one of the goals of this presentation is to communicate that it takes a collective effort to improve educational programming and academic outcomes for students with or without disabilities who are incarcerated in a correctional facility. On this particular slide, we have the moderator, Curtis Kennard and Marion Creighton. Our speakers we have is Sean Addy from the correction, he's the correction director from the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. And next we have Naomi Evans. She's the executive director of the Coalition for Juvenile Justice. And third, we have Ryan Wilson. He's the senior trial attorney, Special Litigation Section, Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the agenda. Let's start with the purpose. The purpose is to provide the state education agencies, local education agencies, public and non-public agencies, technical assistant providers, and other groups or entities a general overview of federal agencies' efforts to improve educational outcomes for students with disabilities in correction facilities during the COVID-19 outbreak and school reopening. Next slide, please. What's the purpose? Next slide, please. Okay, we have the Pennsylvania Department of Education. This is COVID-19 and school reopening. In the first bullet, by the way, before we start the first bullet, did you not know that nearly 10% of Pennsylvania households have no internet access? And starting with the first bullet, Pennsylvania has a roadmap series that support reopening of schools, accelerated learning, an integrated system of support. One of the main focus of this particular bullet and the information therein is Pennsylvania is consistent with high quality academics. Pennsylvania have a focus area of support to learning environment. Pennsylvania's second focus is also to design a system or a platform for educational leaders during the COVID-19 pandemic. The second bullet speaks to the enhancement of instructional opportunity for students in correction facilities. One of the focuses here is Pennsylvania decided to close the learning gap by connecting more Pennsylvania households and scholars and learners to data casting and building a system that supports distant learning. The second focus would be a partnership with the public broadcasting television station. Pennsylvania used data casting. What is data casting? Data casting is a term that derived from data and broadcasting. And we speak about broadcasting, it refers to sending a program over the air that can be picked up by an antenna and played on the television. From the data casting perspective, it refers to using those same signals to securely transmit data that can be used by a computer. And one of the main focus in data casting is Number one, Pennsylvania, by using data cache, were able to send, transmit and send information over the airways to television stations and computers to approximately 76 geographical areas. For example, those areas include 6 adjudicated centers, 6 correction facilities, and 50 local education agencies. For more information, please contact Mr. Jerry Pickman at the Pennsylvania Department of Education. More information we have, this information is in the handouts. At this time, I will be followed by my colleague, Marion Creighton.
Thank you, Curtis. As we move to slide number 8, here are some points to remember as states ensure that services are provided for students with disabilities in correctional facilities. States are strongly encouraged to have an interagency agreement or a memorandum of understanding between state education agencies and correctional facilities. The agreements could include how child fine will be conducted, or even how dispute resolution options will be provided. For example, states should use the OCTAE State Correctional Education Self-Assessment for their internal check on how they are doing with their general supervision responsibilities related to correctional education. Part of a state's general supervision responsibilities include the monitoring of correctional facilities that serve youth with disabilities. With few exceptions, students with disabilities in correctional facilities are entitled to protections under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Slide 9. We have included 2 links to resources that will be helpful to you as schools start to reopen. The first link is to a September 28, 2020 question and answer document that was developed in response to inquiries concerning implementation of the IDEA Part B provisions of services in the COVID-19 environment. From the Q&As, we know that no matter what primary instructional delivery approach is chosen, state education agencies, local educational agencies, and IEP teams remain responsible for ensuring a free, appropriate public education is provided to all children with disabilities. The second link is to the Department of Ed resources specific to the education of students with disabilities in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now to my colleague from the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, Sean Addy.
Hello, my name is Sean Addy, and I'm the Director of Correctional Education in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, or OCTAE, at the U.S. Department of Education. Today, I will be speaking about OCTAE resources that are available to support students with disabilities in correctional facilities. Next slide. The first initiative I'm going to discuss today is the Young Adult Diversion Project. This project was a 3-year technical assistance initiative that helped 16 state and local partnerships provide their justice-involved young adult population with alternatives to prosecution, sentencing, or incarceration, including special education, career and technical education, and other workforce development opportunities. 2 of the resources that came out of this project are a website and a brief, both of which are going through approval processes at the department and will be available at this link in the future. Next slide. Here you can see the purpose behind the Young Adult Diversion Project. This project was a partnership between OCTAE, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and the Department of Justice. This project was designed to foster different ideas for diverting young adults out of the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Next slide. Here's a map of the 4 states and 12 localities that participated in the project. As you can see, it was a range of geographic distribution and partnership leads. Partnership leads included district attorneys, departments of juvenile justice, workforce development boards, community colleges, community-based organizations, alternative high schools, and a community mental health center. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we will be disseminating lessons learned from this project through a combined policy and research brief, as well as a website. These tools will answer key questions about improving workforce development for justice-involved young adults and will contain content overviews on career and technical education, career pathways, and special education. Next slide. This Young Adult Diversion project was informed by the Young Adult Diversion Framework, which illustrates how special education, career and technical education, and other workforce development strategies can be woven into a diversion program. Next slide. Here's a screenshot of the website. This toolkit was created to help diversion programs strengthen their services by providing young adults, those ages 16 through 24, with high quality education and workforce development opportunities. The site includes the Young Adult Diversion Framework, a resource collection, a partnership roadmap, profiles of each partnership in the initiative, and a brief description of the initiative that supported development of this toolkit. Next, I'm going to briefly describe 2 federal formula grants that OCTAE is responsibility for. In recent years, additional federal support for incarcerated individuals is available through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. Title II, Section 222 of WIOA, for example, increased the cap that states can spend on correctional education from 10 to 20%. This title also expanded the allowable program components for corrections education to include 5 new categories. In addition to the categories that were included under the previous legislation, adult education and literacy activities, special education, and secondary education, WIOA now allows states to fund correctional education programs that include these 5 areas: integrated education and training, career pathways, concurrent enrollment, peer tutoring, and transition to reentry initiatives, and other post-release services. Next slide. The recent reauthorization of the Carl D. Perkins Act, called Perkins 5, also includes more support for correctional education. It increased the amount that states can allocate to correctional education from 1% to 2%. It expanded these programs to include juvenile justice facilities. And the legislation makes assurances that the services offered in state correctional institutions and juvenile facilities include high quality CTE programs and programs of study. Next slide. Finally, here are some hyperlinks where you can find out more information about these programs. Thank you again for the opportunity to briefly share what OCTAE is doing to support students with disabilities in correctional and criminal justice settings. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Naomi Smoot-Evans. I'm Executive Director at the Coalition for Juvenile Justice. We are a national nonprofit that works with folks across the country to try to improve the youth legal system at the federal and state level. Next slide, please. I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about the 2018 reauthorization of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. The Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act is the main federal legislation around the youth justice system and youth legal system in our country. It provides 4 core protections for young people who are involved in the youth legal system in the United States. The Juvenile Justice Reform Act, which was the reauthorization of the JJDPA, provided some really important and critical pieces related to the educational system specifically, and the education of young people who are involved with the youth legal system. First, states must now provide assurances in their state plans regarding the youth legal system that they will collaborate with the state educational agency to create a plan to facilitate educational reentry, making sure that young people who are returning from juvenile jails are having a seamless reentry into their home school when they're back in their community. Second, making sure that young people are able to earn full or partial credits for coursework successfully completed while in custody, and that those credits must transfer back to their community school and count towards high school graduation. This is really important to make sure that young people are making the best out of the time that they have in a facility, and that they're still continuing their education during that time. The JJDPA's requirements reflect and complement the increased educational reentry protections that state and local educational agencies and locally operated juvenile correction facilities must provide to receive funding under Title I, Part D of the Every Student Succeeds Act. So it's really complementing other federal legislation that's already in place. Next slide, please. One of the provisions that changed as part of the JJDPA's reauthorization was Title V of that act. Included in Title V was a new funding possibility for restorative justice. Restorative justice, often we think of this as something that's new, but in many ways, it's actually something that has been with us for a very, very long time. Restorative justice practices are a traditional part of many cultures. Native communities have used restorative justice for a very long time. Now they're being embraced by many justice systems and schools as well. They're an important tool because they focus on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large, recognizing that taking someone from the community doesn't really allow the community as a whole to heal, and that is an important part of justice and restorative justice. It's in keeping with the goals of the youth justice system at large. The youth justice system is intended for rehabilitation. It's intended to help make a young person better and a better part of their community, and restorative justice helps support that goal. It's also important now as young people are returning to school, facing the traumas from COVID, and those in facilities have had limited programming and other stressors in place during this time. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention just earlier this month released important guidance that encourages all schools, including schools and facilities, to reopen and to fully support young people. Restorative justice plays an important role as we navigate that reentry process. Next slide, please. What works? There's some keys to successful restorative justice programs, particularly in educational settings. When we're thinking about restorative justice, it's important to remember that restorative practices must include the values of respect, dignity, and mutual concern for all members of the learning community. This includes staff, this includes students, it includes the young person who engaged in the behavior and the victims of that behavior. Restorative justice works best when it instills a commitment to justice, equity, and a belief and a value in the worth of each person, the community as a whole. It should address both the student and staff actions, as well as policies and behaviors that were involved. And it should emphasize equity and a focus on restorative justice, honoring the humanity of each individual that was involved in the community as a whole. Next slide, please.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Wilson. I'm a trial attorney in the United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Special Litigation Section. Special education services are especially important to children with disabilities in correctional facilities. As we all know, education can open many doors. For children with disabilities in correctional facilities, these doors can help youth successfully transition back to the community, obtain employment after incarceration, and prevent them from reoffending. However, despite our understanding of the importance of education, we often struggle to understand the responsibility to provide special education and related services to children with disabilities in correctional facilities. Today, I will be discussing the law around the responsibility of local and state educational agencies to ensure that young people in facilities who may be eligible for special education and related services receive those services. I will explain IDEA law, and I will provide an example from a case where our office took a position on the responsibility of agencies to provide services to children in correctional facilities. First, just a little about the authority of the U.S. Department of Justice as it relates to protecting the rights of children with disabilities in local prisons and jails. The Civil Rights Division enforces 2 statutes that allow us to seek remedies for a violation of the rights of young people in prisons or jails: the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act and 34 U.S.C. 12601. Both statutes allow the Civil Rights Division to review conditions in correctional facilities that may constitute a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the statutory or constitutional rights of young people. This may include a violation of young people's rights under the IDEA. Our investigations have found correctional facilities and state and local educational agencies have violated the IDEA by denying young people in facilities the special education and related services required by the IDEA. In those cases, we are often able to create agreements that require cooperation between state and local educational agencies and correctional facilities. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the issues that confuse school districts and correctional facilities regarding whether young people with disabilities in adult facilities are entitled to special education services. These young people in adult correctional facilities are often 18 to 21 years old, charged as adults, but according to the IDEA, these youth are still eligible for special education and related services. The IDEA is clear that the requirement to provide a free, appropriate public education extends to children in juvenile and adult correctional facilities. So who is responsible for providing special education to young people in adult facilities? Well, the IDEA places that responsibility on all agencies within a state that are involved in the education of children. So that includes state educational agencies, local educational agencies, and state and local juvenile and adult correctional facilities. This is a joint responsibility. The IDEA does not exempt one public agency from its duty to provide special education and related services because another public agency shares that duty. As Marion spoke about earlier, many educational agencies developed interagency agreements between the state and local educational agency and the correctional facility to describe the duties that each agency has to provide special education and related services. Next slide. There are 4 narrow exceptions to the requirement that children in adult prisons and jails have access to the services in the IDEA. Those exceptions are listed below, but I will explain them. First, if the young person is between 18 and 21 years old, and the young person has not previously been identified as a child with a disability and does not already have an IEP, there is no requirement to provide special education or related services to that youth. Second, public agencies do not have to include children with disabilities in state and district-wide assessments if the young person was convicted as an adult under state law and the young person is incarcerated in an adult prison. Third, public agencies do not have to provide transition services if the young person was convicted as an adult under state law, incarcerated in an adult prison, and will age out of services before they are eligible to be released. Finally, if there is a genuine and compelling security interest that cannot be accommodated, public agencies can modify the services in a young person's IEP or the placement where the young person receives those services. Next slide. In 2018, DOJ filed a statement of interest in a case involving the Palm Beach County School Board and the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office regarding who was responsible for providing special education and related services to young people with disabilities charged as adults, detained in the Palm Beach County Jail, and placed in solitary confinement. The Sheriff's Office argued that it had no responsibility to provide special education services. And the school board argued that it had no responsibility to provide special education services to youth placed in solitary confinement. In our statement of interest, which is linked in the PowerPoint, we affirmed the IDEA law requiring all agencies involved in the education of children to provide special education and related services to eligible children. Public agencies cannot avoid their IDEA responsibilities by allowing another entity to interfere with carrying out its responsibilities. Thank you so much for your time, and I will pass on to Tara Jordan for closing takeaways.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Please keep in mind the 3 takeaways. Improvement of educational outcomes for students with disabilities in correctional facilities is a collaborative effort. A good way to formalize collaborative efforts is via interagency agreements. Federal resources are available to state agencies to assist with the delivery of special education and related services to students with disabilities in correctional facilities. Next slide. Here are the U.S. Department of Educational contacts: Sean, Curtis, Marion, Tara, Celeste, and Jasmine. Next slide. Followed by Department of Justice and Coalition for Juvenile Justice contacts, Ryan and Naomi. Next slide. Finally, the Pennsylvania Department of Education contact, Judd. Next slide. Listed are handouts and resources available for reference. All handouts will be listed on the conference website. If there are any questions, please contact those listed in slides 30 through 32. This concludes the Students with Disabilities Correctional Facilities COVID-19 and Reopening. Thank you for joining us.